In this video, I want to talk about the recent Netflix documentary, The Game Changers. Now, for those of you who haven't seen it, the documentary is by a British guy called James Wooks. He's a former UFC fighter and unfortunately he gets injured. During that time, he starts to research about nutrition and how he can maximize and speed up his recovery and comes across some information about a plant-based diet. He believes it's the best choice for him, and he now thinks it could be the best choice for all of us to improve our health, performance, and body composition. And that is a message behind the documentary. That a plant-based diet is better than a diet that contains animal protein, and that animal protein is actually having a negative effect on our health, performance, and body composition. So, we've broken it down into 4 different sections. We're going to look at the information they provide, the statements and claims they make, and see whether a plant-based diet really is a game changer. So, the first thing that piques James's interest when he comes across information about a plant-based diet is a study that says that gladiators were actually vegan. And that even back then, they were moving and they thought that a plant-based diet was the best choice to improve health, performance, and body composition of their gladiators. Now, the first issue with this information is that it's not a study, it's actually an article that they're referring to. And the article just looks at one specific region, and they test the minerals in the bones, and there's a high amount of strontium to calcium in the bones, which indicates predominantly a plant-based diet. The article says that they were vegetarian and not exclusively vegan. Now, if we look at the study that the article is based on, it looks at lots of different regions, and we see lots of different dietary trends based on the region of where those gladiators lived. So there was a region that was closer to the ocean where they ate seafood, aka animal protein. And in terms of choosing a plant-based diet for health, performance, and body composition, it was actually quite the opposite. In the actual study, they say that the gladiators had something infamous, or used to eat something infamous called a gladiator mash, which was barley, a lot of beans, and legumes. And this was to help them pack on the pounds and get/stay fat. That was advantageous for them in the arena because it helped to shield them from blows, it helped to protect their nerve endings and major arteries, and someone could get cut and bleed but still continue to fight. So I don't know if that's what we should be striving for in terms of optimal health and performance. So the first bit of information that they give is pretty misleading and a bad representation of the information. We then move on to some elite athletes. So firstly, I'm going to talk about the endurance-based athletes. So we have an Olympic cyclist, an ultra-marathoner, and a 400-meter runner. Now, they start to sow this seed where they tell you that we have been told that protein is our body's preferred fuel source. And essentially the reason why we are consuming animal protein is because we think that that protein is fueling our body for our activities. Now, I hope nobody has ever told you this because this is categorically incorrect. Okay? Our body's preferential fuel source is glycogen, the stored form of carbohydrates, and fats. Now, they say in the documentary that protein cannot be used as fuel. That is incorrect also. Protein can be used as fuel. There's a process called gluconeogenesis where amino acids can be converted into glycogen and be used as energy. This process is very inefficient and doesn't happen that often because hopefully through diet we have enough carbohydrates in the form of glycogen and fat to be used as energy, as that's our body's preferred source. They also say that the consumption of protein, aka animal protein, has a negative effect because it can impact and reduce glycogen stores. Again, this is incorrect. When we look at post-workout nutrition, and this is essentially where the anabolic window and the myth behind the anabolic window started, was that in research in endurance athletes, they showed that getting in something post-workout was more important when there was another endurance event within a 24-hour window. And what they did is they tested lots of different variations of post-workout nutrition. So they had carbohydrate only, they also had carbohydrate and protein of varying amounts, they also had equal amounts. And carbohydrates and proteins are both 4 calories per gram. So let's say you have 100 grams or 100 calories from carbohydrates, you then get 50 calories from protein, 50 calories from carbohydrates. It's the same amount of food and also the same amount of calories, same amount of grams per protein and carbohydrates, etc. And they actually showed that having protein and a carbohydrate mix pretty equal after the endurance event actually helped to improve recovery, and we saw an improved performance in that similar endurance event the next day. So protein can be used as fuel. Protein does not have a negative effect on glycogen. Now, these athletes all claim to have a positive experience from shifting from a plant-based diet, but they haven't always been plant-based. Doesn't talk about anything about their training or their genetics or what they did prior to becoming plant-based. Now, if you take any elite athlete and make some sort of change to their diet, they're probably still going to be an elite athlete. Okay? They've already made it to that level. And maybe the consumption of animal proteins helped get them to that level, and now they're there, they don't necessarily need as much protein, or now having more of a plant-based diet can still sustain them performing at that level. It might also be the simple fact that we know that glycogen is our body's preferential fuel source, and now they are switching to a diet where they're consuming more carbohydrates and glycogen, and that might be fueling their training, increased adaptation, and also increased performance. So again, nothing in this little section here shows that having animal protein is having a negative effect on health, performance, and body composition. What it does show is that we have some successful athletes, ultramarathoners, Olympic cyclists, and 400-meter runners who are plant-based, and that a plant-based diet can be successful. We then move on to the next thing, where we'll look at a few different athletes and we'll start to talk about protein and protein for muscle building. Now, this is probably the biggest or the most popular thing that people understand about a plant-based diet. It's like, where are you going to get your protein from when shifting over to a plant-based diet? We know that on a regular diet we can have animal protein, and that's a lot. It's more simple to reach our protein goal. But on a plant-based diet, it can be more difficult. Now, in the documentary, they say that this is a false claim, and that all plant-based protein sources contain all the essential amino acids in varying amounts. Not a lie, but not the whole truth. Varying amounts, yes, aka not enough of the essential amino acids to have the same effect on increasing and improving muscle protein synthesis. The same way we have calories in versus calories out, and we have an energy balance, we have protein breakdown and muscle protein synthesis. Now, if the synthesis is higher than the breakdown, then we see an increase in lean muscle mass. If they're similar, we see a maintenance. If breakdown is higher than protein synthesis, then we see a reduction in muscle mass. Now, we know that protein quality is lower because of a lower amount of essential amino acids. They then shift quickly after that statement of varying essential amino acids to use a quote from a particular study that says that provided you get enough of the essential amino acids, the protein source is irrelevant. Again, that is true, not a lie, but not the whole truth. Now, if you actually read that study, and I did read that study compares whey protein to a rice protein. And in that study, they found that having the same amount of protein, whey versus rice, whey increased muscle protein synthesis more than rice protein. They then referenced lots of other studies where they compare different types of whey protein, whey isolate, whey concentrate, and they saw that there was no difference in terms of different types of whey protein. They then referenced two other studies that compared a whey to a plant-based source. One compared whey to soy, one compared whey to pea. Now, in these two different studies that compared whey to a plant-based source, they had a higher serving size. And what they saw was that there was a better performance from the plant-based comparative to the whey. Whey still performed better than rice protein in the study that they cite, and also performed better than soy and pea protein in the other two studies referenced in their study. And what they do is they attribute the better performance of the pea protein and the soy protein, better performance than the rice protein, due to the fact that there was a larger serving size, so there was a higher amount of essential amino acids in that serving size to make up for the lower protein quality of the plant-based source. So the study that they cite actually says and states that an animal protein source performs better than a plant protein source. Nothing in any of those studies say that an animal protein source is having a negative effect. Now we start to look at different athletes that require more protein, aka more muscle mass. So we have a strongman called Patrick. They talk about Brian Jennings, a boxer. We have a couple of physique athletes and bodybuilders, and also they talk about UFC, Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor. So let's talk about this one first. So they basically say that the most significant reason why Nate Diaz beat Conor McGregor was because Diaz was a vegan and Conor McGregor ate animal protein. They failed to mention anything about training, genetics, fighting styles. Also the fact that Conor McGregor beat Diaz in the rematch. We then look at the boxer, Brian Jennings. So very, very successful boxer. He switched to become a plant-based athlete. Again, he has a great personal experience of being a plant-based athlete, but personal experience doesn't equal fact. And they talk about one of the highlights of his career was fighting Vladimir Klitschko, who is one of the greatest athletes and greatest boxers of all time. He managed to go 12 rounds with Klitschko, which many people don't, but Klitschko still won, and Klitschko is one of the greatest of all time. Who eats animal protein? This is clearly showing that animal protein does not have a negative effect on somebody's ability to perform a certain sport, and actually that person performed better than the plant-based athlete. What it does highlight though is that, again, a plant-based diet can be successful. We then move on to some physique athletes, and this is where they start to talk a little bit more about protein quality and quantity. And again, these guys have fantastic physiques, nothing about their training or genetics. And again, these guys could probably follow any diet within reason and still look awesome. Again, they have a lot of things in their favor, a lot of hard work and effort, again, on training and genetics. But they cite another study. Now, this study measures a high carbohydrate group versus a lower carbohydrate group in terms of what is the most, comparing them in terms of which one is better suited for increasing lean muscle mass. Now, earlier in the documentary, they give us they start to sow this seed that we're consuming animal protein to fuel our bodies, and that diet that contains animal protein is higher in protein, lower in carb, and that a plant-based diet is higher in carb and also contains protein. So when we get here and they start talking about the carbohydrate groups, we just immediately default to thinking that the higher carbohydrate group is a plant-based group and the lower carbohydrate group is the animal protein-based group. Now, the study compares a high carbohydrate group and a ketogenic, so literally the lowest amount of carbohydrates you could consume. We know that carbohydrates in the form of glycogen are our body's main fuel source. So it makes sense that the group of people who are consuming adequate energy to fuel their activities to gain more lean muscle mass perform better than the ketogenic group, the group that are having less than 10% of total calories from carbohydrates. And again, we think that the high carbohydrate group is the plant-based group, and maybe the low carbohydrate group is the animal protein group. Now, this study only had one nutritional intervention, and that was the ketogenic group. It doesn't say anything about specifically one group having plant-based only and one group having animal protein only. And the fact that it doesn't say that there was any other intervention leads us to believe that the individuals in the study could eat whatever they wanted, and probably did eat some forms of animal protein, maybe both groups, because they were having high amounts of protein per gram per body weight. Again, and they were allowed to eat ad libitum, that there were no scheduling meal times, there was no scheduled meal size and macronutrients. It was only the one nutritional intervention of the ketogenic group. So again, this study doesn't even compare a plant-based source to an animal-based source. So again, is there any negative effect to consuming animal protein? Doesn't look like it. Is there any positive effect or extra benefit from following a plant-based diet? to this point, still possibly not. And what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of cherry picking of certain bits of information in certain studies, and also cherry picking of athletes. Like, we're just seeing a handful of athletes who, again, are very successful in their specific sport or field, but we're not seeing all of the vegan athletes. Okay? We're not seeing maybe the person who comes 24th in the 400 meters, or we're not seeing the boxer who doesn't win that many matches, who is a plant-based athlete. We're only seeing the people who are performing very, very well. And those people are actually a very, very small percentage of the total amount of athletes. And probably the majority of the athletes performing at that highest level are consuming some forms of animal protein. And then we'll come on to the final section where they're looking at inflammation and health. Now, we definitely see a correlation between people who eat meat, particularly processed meats and red meat, and an increase in cardiovascular disease, cancers, and increases in inflammation and those risk factors. But what we're comparing just the general population to someone on a plant-based diet. Now, someone on a plant-based diet is categorized to be seeking out healthy behaviors. Okay? The person on the plant-based diet is probably doing lots of other things to improve their health. They're probably more active. They probably don't smoke. They consume less alcohol. They prepare more of their own foods. They control their total body weight. They probably control their calorie intake. They take less risks versus just somebody who doesn't really exercise, maybe smokes, has a lot of alcohol. Okay? So there is correlation between this person and the general population having increased risk of cardiovascular disease, cancers, and inflammation. But is it directly caused from them consuming meat? Probably not. There was a study in Australia of over 11,000 people, and they recruited these people from health food stores and categorized them as plant-based athletes and people who consume animal protein. And they studied all-cause mortality. And they showed that in similar individuals with healthy seeking behaviors, that there was no significant difference, plant-based or non-plant-based, consuming animal protein, in health risk, inflammation. So the correlation is there, but the causation is not there. Okay? When you're consuming high quality animal proteins, leaner sources of animal proteins, again, we see very little difference. But again, we're often not comparing like for like. We also see that in regards to inflammation, and dairy is often vilified or demonized in terms of inflammation, that in any weight loss study, okay, regardless of the diet type or the size of the deficit, the individuals in the groups, that whenever we see weight loss, okay, we see a reduction in inflammation and improvement in health markers. So again, that gives us another thing. So if somebody is seeking out healthy behaviors, okay, if someone is controlling their body weight, they're probably going to have improved health versus somebody, again, who is not active, who might smoke, who might consume alcohol, who makes poor food choices. There's a low quality standard of their food, and they're possibly consuming more total calories. Okay, so there's lots of other lifestyle factors that are contributing to inflammation and health. There is an increase in risk factor of different diseases, and this is reported in a misleading way in this documentary and also in another documentary called What the Health. So they say that there is a 20% increased risk factor. Again, this is not a lie, but it's not the whole truth. Your risk factor goes from 5%, and then if you consume animal protein, it goes to 6%. So that is a 20% increase, but you only go up by 1 total percent. So you're still within a very, very safe range. So again, provided you have healthy seeking behaviors, we see no significant difference between a plant-based individual and a non-plant-based individual. We then start to talk about the fact that our bodies need carbohydrates, and again, we just assume that the high carbohydrate diet is a plant-based diet. They they say that our brains only function on glucose, that we need a constant we need a constant flow of glucose in our body and carbohydrates through our diet. But you can definitely still do that whilst consuming animal protein. So that doesn't tell us that plant-based is better, and it doesn't also tell us that animal protein is having a negative effect. We then see in terms of health and foods, there's a scene where there are a lot of NFL people consuming plant-based foods, but just all junk foods, sliders, mac and cheese, like fake chicken fingers, or chicken tenders, whatever you guys call them. And now there were different studies done. There was one specifically that compared vegan cheese to a regular cheese. And they saw that inflammation was actually high in the vegan cheese because the vegan cheese was more processed and it had a higher amount of saturated fat. So just because a food is vegan or vegetarian or plant-based doesn't necessarily make it healthier than a regular version. Again, if you're consuming high quality animal protein and animal products, they can be just as healthy as consuming plant-based ones, and sometimes even healthier, because they have to go through different processes and is increase in saturated fat. But we just have this assumption that a vegan food is better, and often what happens is when people go plant-based, they just swap out their regular food and their food choices, then maybe their bad food choices, and switch to a plant-based source. They might see a reduction in total calories, because on average, someone on a plant-based diet consumes 600 calories less per day, so they might see some weight loss, but are they still maximizing the opportunity for improvements in health, during their food choices and that plant-based consumption? If they're just switching to vegan junk foods, possibly not. So the information, the statements, and the claims that they make in the documentary are being generous, very, very weak. Again, they cherry pick individuals to fit their bias. They cherry pick like specific parts of studies, and certain studies that don't even fit the message behind the documentary. Again, talk about another athlete, actually quite prevalent in the documentary, you might have seen it, that guy Patrick, the strongman, awesome athlete. He says that he gained 25 kgs when he stopped eating meat and went to plants. That's just a calorie thing, and probably similar to the gladiators. It was more palatable to eat a high carbohydrate, high fat diet, and that helped him to increase his calories and increase his total body weight. His diet is reviewed, not in the documentary, but on lots of different fitness sites, probably after the popularization of this documentary. But he has maybe 4 to 5 protein shakes a day. He can't physically get enough protein in for his needs from just consuming regular foods in his diet. So again, does that prove that animal proteins have a negative effect? No. Does it prove that plant-based nutrition is superior to a regular diet with animal protein? No. So again, very, very weak documentary, very, very disappointing documentary. Plant-based diets are definitely becoming more popular, and plant-based options are becoming more popular. There is the ethical and environmental argument between a plant-based diet, and this could have been an awesome opportunity for them to showcase all these amazing athletes and talk about how they are maximizing and making a plant-based diet successful, and some simple lifestyle and habit changes that we could use on how we could reduce the consumption of animal protein, animal products, and shift more towards a plant-based diet. Maybe not completely, but start to incorporate some of these, again, good habits and lifestyle factors. And could people see improvements in health, performance, and body composition? Yes, but what they do is it has to be polarizing. They make it seem like you have to pick a side. You have to be 100% plant-based, and this is the only way, the best way. If you consume animal protein, you're not going to be a healthy human, you're also a bad person. And it's just not that simple. Like most things in fitness, it's just somewhere in the middle. Now, there have obviously been lots of criticisms about the documentary, and their main ammunition during the documentary and afterwards about people who still promote the consumption of animal products and animal protein is that those people are benefiting in some way from the consumption of animal products and animal protein, aka a conflict of interest. Now let's look at this documentary. The producer, James Cameron, owns a pea protein company. I think that's a conflict of interest. His wife is an environmentalist. I think I read she opened up a plant-based school, whatever that is. But again, conflict of interest. Arnold Schwarzenegger is in the documentary. He has a supplement line which has some plant-based products in there. The experts in the documentary are all vegetarian or vegans. They sell plant-based plans or plant-based products. Again, huge conflict of interest in there. So I don't think that this is a very well thought out documentary. I can understand from watching it how people can get confused and people can be misled, because why would you think a documentary would put in so much bad information that if you wanted to, you could just go and read the study and see that what they said is not actually true, but it's portrayed in a way that makes you think that it is truthful and that you can definitely trust the information. So again, disappointing. I wish they would just showcase how successful you could be on a plant-based diet, and then you could decide whether that fits your personal preference. So I guess the biggest takeaway from this is that you shouldn't get your nutritional information from Netflix. If you have any other questions about the documentary, again, there are a decent amount of things that I just could not cover because I didn't have time didn't have time to do it. So if you have any other questions, then please post them below. And thank you so much for watching.